Today, we're diving into a really incredible moment in history. It's a story about how an entire society was turned on its head, not by one person, but by three completely different yet equally revolutionary figures. We're talking about a scholar, a prophet, and a warrior, who together forged what we know as modern Kerala.
To really get the scale of what they accomplished, you have to picture what 19th century Kerala was like. I mean, this was a society locked in one of the most brutal, rigid caste systems you can imagine. There were these oppressive rules of untouchability and even unapproachability, where literally the shadow of a person from a so-called lower caste was believed to pollute someone from an upper caste. Just think about that for a sec.
And it was in this suffocating environment that something amazing happened, almost like a miracle. Three incredible individuals all emerged pretty much the same time. They weren't working in isolation. Their lives, their struggles, they all overlapped. It created what you might call a perfect storm for radical, revolutionary change.
Yeah, just look at this timeline. It really shows you how interconnected their era was. First, you've got Chattampi Swamikal, the eldest. Then, just 3 years later, Sree Narayana Guru is born. And then, Ayyankali. For decades, these three men were breathing the same air, fighting against the same broken system, and shaping this one, single, absolutely pivotal period in history.
So, let's start with the intellectual force of this trio. Chattampi Swamikal. He wasn't out there leading marches in the streets. No. His rebellion was a rebellion of the mind. He chose to dismantle this oppressive system from the inside out, using the very weapon of his oppressors, knowledge.
His birth name was Ayappan, but he earned the nickname Chattampi, which means something like monitor or leader, because he was just that brilliant. He was known as a true master of all arts, a Sarva Vedya Parangatan, and he decided to turn that incredible intellect into a tool for social justice. And this is how he did it. It was absolutely genius. In one of his works, Vedadikara Nirupanam, he used their own sacred texts to prove that everyone, including lower castes and women, had the right to study the Vedas. Then, in another, Prachina Malayalam, he just dismantled the myth that Kerala was a gift to Brahmins, proving that others were the original landowners. He was using logic and history to pull the rug right out from under the caste system.
And his intellect wasn't just some local legend. When the great Swami Vivekananda himself met him, he was so blown away by Swamikal's deep understanding of spiritual concepts that he just called him a remarkable man. When a mind like Vivekananda says that, it tells you everything you need to know.
Okay, so if Swamikala was the scholar who deconstructed the old system, our next visionary, Sree Narayana Guru, was the prophet who built a new one. He didn't just tear down the old walls, he built new doors for everyone to walk through.
Sree Narayana Guru is often called the architect of the Kerala Renaissance, and for good reason. His entire life was a mission to free people from the prisons of caste and religious superstition, guiding them towards a much more enlightened, universal idea of spirituality.
This quote, this gets to the very heart of his revolution. In 1888, at a place called Aruvippuram, he did something completely unthinkable for a non-Brahmin. He went down to the river, picked up a stone, and consecrated it as a Shiva lingam. When the Brahmins questioned his authority, his reply was brilliant. He just said he consecrated a non-Brahmin Shiva. And above the temple, he put up these words, a blueprint for a new inclusive world. And it's so important to see how his philosophy evolved. You can see it right here. He started with a stone, right? A traditional symbol, but he used it to reclaim spiritual authority for everyone. Then, he moved on to consecrating a lamp, symbolizing the light of knowledge over blind ritual. But then came the final, most profound step. He consecrated a mirror. The message was mind-blowing. God isn't in some stone or idol out there. God is within you. You are divine. The journey was from ritual to pure self-realization.
But Guru knew that spiritual ideas weren't enough. You have to build institutions. So he founded the SNDP Yogam to give his movement organizational muscle. And then, get this, in 1924, he organized an all-religion conference, the first of its kind in all of Asia. He was building the practical foundations for a whole new society.
His influence was just immense. The Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore himself met him, and later said he'd never met anyone with greater spiritual stature. This wasn't just a regional leader, he was a spiritual giant on the world stage.
Okay, but intellectual arguments and spiritual philosophy, as powerful as they are, needed a third element to really set the revolution on fire. It needed a warrior. And that's where Ayyankali comes in. While Swamikal used the pen and Guru used philosophy,
Ayyankali used direct, fearless, and defiant action to fight for the rights of the most oppressed people in society.
Ayyankali's story is it's unbelievable. He was born into the Pulia community, who were treated as slaves. He was illiterate his whole life. And yet, this man rose up to become one of the most powerful and effective voices for social justice. His life just proves that true leadership comes from courage, not a formal education.
So let's talk about one of his most legendary acts of defiance. At the time, the law was simple and it was cruel. People from his community were flat out forbidden from using public roads. It was a daily humiliation designed to grind them down and reinforce their place in the social order.
So what did Ayyankali do? He didn't just protest. He didn't just ask for permission. He decided to shatter that law with a single audacious act. He got a bullock cart, a Villuvandi, a symbol of upper caste status, decorated it, put on his best clothes, and boldly rode it right down the main public road. This was more than a journey. It was a rolling declaration of independence.
And with that one ride, he sent a message that echoed across the land. The old rules, they were done. The days of silent suffering were over. A new age of demanding your rights had just begun, sparked by one man in a bullock cart.
And he wasn't just a fighter. He was a brilliant strategist. When upper castes burned down a school to stop a Pulia girl from enrolling, Ayyankali organized the first ever agricultural strike in history. He linked the fight for education directly to the wallets of the powerful landowners. His message was clear: if our children can't learn, your fields won't be farmed. Just genius. And look at his progression. He goes from a street activist to building an organization, the SJPS, to support his community. Then he gets nominated to the State Assembly, where he fought for his people for 28 years. Even Mahatma Gandhi saw his power, calling him the Pulia Raja, the king of the Pulia. So, let's put it all together. We have a scholar who demolished the old ideology, a prophet who created a new spiritual vision, and a warrior who demanded human rights through direct action. Their methods were different, but their goals were the same. Let's see how their work connected to create something entirely new. This table really connects the dots perfectly. Think about it. Ayyankali's defiant ride for the right to use public roads, that lit the spark for the massive Vaikam Satyagraha. Chattampi Swamikal's intellectual takedown of Brahmanical authority, that gave these movements the philosophical foundation they needed to even exist. And Sree Narayana Guru's fight for the right of everyone to worship, that directly fueled movements like the Guruvayura Satyagraha, which ultimately led to the historic temple entry proclamation. You see, their ideas weren't just theories, they were the blueprints for a real-world revolution.
So in the end, the most important takeaway is that it took all three. The scholar gave people the intellectual permission to question the unquestionable. The prophet gave them a new, unifying vision and the organizations to make it real. And the warrior fought for those rights right there on the ground, proving that courage could literally change the world. Together, they didn't just reform society, they rebuilt it from the ground up.
And that leaves us with one final thought. Their incredible story shows us that real, lasting change needs different kinds of courage, right? The intellectual courage to challenge bad ideas, the spiritual courage to imagine and build something better, and the physical courage to stand up and demand what's right. It really makes you wonder, as we face the challenges of our own time, what combination of the scholar, the prophet, and the warrior do we need today?